In this lecture, we are going to look at the obligations of authorized representative. Now, believe it or not, almost this entire series on the EU AI Act has been concerned with obligations required by providers. Think back to the beginning of this series, we listed 6 AI operators. So we still have obligations for 5 more AI operators to go. I know. People had been reaching out to me and asking, Dr. David, should I prepare for version 1 of the exam or version 2 of the exam? And I said, prepare for version 1 because the EU AI Act alone additions are a bear. Well, can't help you. Can't go back in time. I mean, maybe you can go back in time if you have access to that kind of AI. But anyway, let's plow forward. I'm going to start with a very quick review of the AI operators, and then we're going to look at obligations for authorized representatives. So here's a list of the different AI operators. Articles 16 through 22, all concern providers. Articles 22 through 25 deal with these other operators. So we're going to deal with these in order as they appear in the EU AI Act. Again, I don't think you need to concern yourself with the article numbers. The most important thing is that you know what the operators are. That's the most important thing, that you can identify them. Number 2, that you know conceptually what is an importer, what is a distributor, what is a deployer. Number 3, that you can compare and contrast their responsibilities. And number 4, if you still have bandwidth, then knowing the details that I'm going to be outlining in the next several lectures would be important as well. I know it's a lot. I know it's just one statute, but altogether you can expect somewhere between 5 to 7 questions on the EU AI Act. And again, if I was an evil examiner, this is where I would try and take people's points away. So here we're going to focus on authorized representatives. We're then going to look at importers, distributors, deployers, and finally, product manufacturers. Obligations for authorized representatives are as follows. They should have a mandate and documentation. They should perform due diligence. They need to comply with compliance requirements. There are record keeping and reporting requirements, and they must cooperate with the competent authorities. Concerning their mandate and documentation, they must hold their written mandate from the provider. This specifies their tasks and responsibilities, and they must be prepared to provide a copy of this documentation upon request. These individuals must also perform due diligence, that is, verifying of the provider the EU Declaration of Conformity, the technical documentation, and the name, address, and contact details of the provider. Concerning compliance, they need to register high-risk systems in the EU database, and they must terminate the provider mandate if the provider is not fulfilling their obligations. For record keeping, they must retain the following for 10 years: the provider's contact details, copy of the EU Declaration of Conformity, technical documentation, as well as the certificate issued by the notified body. Now, these are 2 terms we haven't come across yet, certificate and notified body, and so I'm going to define these for you now. So the conformity assessment is conducted, it is completed. Evidence that the system has passed the conformity assessment is then issued as this certificate. So the certificate is evidence of compliance. The notified body is an independent organization designated by EU member states, and they assess conformity of products pre-market. When an authorized representative terminates a mandate, they must notify the Market Surveillance Authority, notify the notified body, and provide a reason for the mandate's termination. Finally, authorized representatives must cooperate with competent authorities as required. That includes serving as the point of contact for EU national authorities, providing documentation upon request, demonstrating conformity, providing access to logs, and cooperating with national authorities, for example, concerning the reduction and mitigation of risk. In this lecture, we talked about the obligations for authorized representatives. This includes holding a written mandate from providers that specify their tasks and responsibilities, and being able to provide this upon request. These individuals or organizations must also perform due diligence, Concerning compliance, they must register high-risk systems in the EU database, and they must terminate the provider mandate if the provider is not fulfilling their obligations. Record-keeping requirements include retaining the list of documents and information here for at least 10 years. You should remember what certified or what the certificate is, as well as notified body. Again, the notified body issues a certificate upon completion of the conformity assessment, and this certificate is evidence of compliance. The notified body is an independent organization designated by EU member states, and they assess conformity of products pre-market. Concerning reporting, when an authorized representative terminates a mandate, they must notify the MSA, the notified body, and provide a reason for the mandate's termination. Finally, authorized representatives must cooperate with competent authorities as required.